morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. The first order of business, if I could, before we actually start our media briefing, is I've been asked to ask you to please turn off any cell phones, pagers, other things that would otherwise disrupt our gathering this morning. Thank you very much. Welcome to our press briefing on Project Rachel. My name is Deirdre McQuaid, and I'm the Assistant Director for Policy and Communications at the USCCB's Secretariat on Pro-Life Activities. And today it's my pleasure to facilitate this press briefing on Project Rachel, which is the Church's healing ministry to those who have been involved in abortion. In addition to those who are here in the room with us, I'd just like to briefly greet those who are joining us virtually by the wonders of the USCCB website. It's good to have you watching along. Yesterday, Cardinal DiNardo, Cardinal O'Malley, and Cardinal Wuerl made a presentation to the full body of bishops on Project Rachel. And today's briefing builds on the Cardinals' compelling presentation in which they called for post-abortion healing to be a central component of the new evangelization. Our experts will help explain that profound need for healing after abortion, as well as the Church's unique role in providing integrated help, addressing the needs of the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. Our presenters, whom I'll introduce in a bit more detail as their turns arise, are my far left, your right, Marianne Luthin, Father James Stack, Dr. Vincent Rue, and Susan Wills. But before they give their presentations, I'd like to introduce to you the chair of the Bishop's Pro-Life Committee and the Archbishop of Galveston, Houston, Cardinal DiNardo, who would like to greet you with his own comments. Cardinal.
Thank you very much, Deirdre. Thanks to the panel, and Susan also do a great job today. On behalf of Cardinal Sean O'Malley and Cardinal Donald Wuerl, I want to welcome each of you to this briefing on this tremendously important mission of Project Rachel Ministry. Although yesterday's presentation was necessarily brief, I hope that the three of us were able to convey the conviction that we all share, that Project Rachel Ministry is at the heart of the Church's mission at this time in her history. While not every mother or every father who has lost a child in an abortion will experience serious mental health problems, there are millions of women and men who struggle, often for years, with profound grief and with remorse and with guilt. Many of them also suffer trauma-related symptoms, things like flashbacks, nightmares, and even panic attacks. Because of their sense of isolation and shame, as well as the mistaken fear that God will never forgive them, many then become trapped in despair for years. But that is not God's plan for us. Through His Church, He wants to draw all of wounded humanity to His loving heart and to give us His love and grace so that we can be renewed in spirit and then free to become fully ourselves as God created us to be. That is what Project Rachel Ministry offers, a way out of the darkness of despair over a past sin and a way into a new life of hope, joy, and peace. I'm sorry that I have to leave you now to join my fellow bishops in our regional meetings, but I do leave you in extremely capable hands and in the confidence that you will be informed and enlightened by the presentations that will follow this morning. Thank you again for your interest in Project Rachel Ministry and for your attendance today. God bless you all. I have one last comment, and that is I want to thank all of the staff of the Pro-Life Committee who are intensely involved in this ministry. Certainly Susan Wills and Deirdre, they have been excellent animators for what the work is that is going on throughout the Diocese of the United States. For though this is a kind of national issue and a beloved project of the bishops, it has to hit home. And the only way it hits home is in every diocese that have effective Project Rachel ministries. The Project Rachel ministry in Washington and in Boston is excellent, and it has one other component that I, as the chair of the pro-life committee, love. They're very generous with their time to help other dioceses. So thank you all very much. God bless you all today.
I have the pleasure now of introducing to you Marianne Luthin, who has been the director of Project Rachel in the Archdiocese of Boston since 2002, where she directs the pro-life office. And she's been working this past year as a consultant to the USCCB, along with Julia Shalava, who is with us today, in the Archdiocese of Washington, to develop training programs for Project Rachel ministry directors and priests. Mrs. Luthin will describe the diocesan services offered to women and men through Project Rachel ministry, as well as her personal experiences witnessing to the healing grace of God in their lives. Marianne?
Thank you, Deirdre. Forgiveness, healing, and hope is the mission of Project Rachel. And you might ask, well, exactly who needs the help of suffering from past abortion pain and grief? At the beginning of the day, I think it's important for us to look at some of the numbers. For the best estimates we can receive, about 30% of American women are expected to have an abortion over the course of their life. For those who self-describe themselves as Catholic, that percentage is identical to the general population. So that means within our church, we have somewhere in the vicinity of an estimated 10 million women, about in my Archdiocese of Boston, about 200,000, who have been directly involved in abortion. And that's just the women. That doesn't count the others who are involved. The fathers, the friends, the families, the parents who may have encouraged abortion, the counselors, and the doctors. So potentially there are millions of Catholics who will at some point need the services of Project Rachel. So what is the vision of Project Rachel? Well, it really takes its vision from a beautiful scripture passage in the book of the prophet Jeremiah, where we encounter Rachel weeping. You're probably familiar with it. Rachel weeps. She weeps inconsolably for her children who are no more. And then the Lord approaches her and says, cease your cries of mourning. There is hope for your future. And I think all of us who are involved with Project Rachel in whatever capacity can understand the tears and the pain and the hope and the healing and the love of God. But I know it took me quite a while to fully understand the import of that passage, because in effect, Rachel could not heal herself. No matter how many tears she shed, no matter how hard she cried, she could not heal herself. It was only the love and mercy of God, which was always there, that was her salvation. And so with Project Rachel, the intent is to help both women and men experience this healing love and mercy of God. In a particular way, it is through the sacrament of reconciliation, but also through counseling in a safe and confidential group experience with other women. Project Rachel Ministries is committed to an integrated approach to healing. Every woman's story is unique. And Project Rachel Ministries provides a safe and loving place to bare her soul and say the words which for many women have been never able to speak. It is a freeing experience that opens her up to receiving the healing love and mercy of God. Healing includes a spiritual dimension. Sacramental healing is a central focus of Project Rachel Ministries. But professional counseling is also available for the emotional and psychological dimensions of healing, particularly if there are underlying issues such as sexual abuse, addictions, dysfunctional or troubled family relationships. And Dr. Rue will be speaking more about that later, I'm sure. It's an important point for all of us involved with Project Rachel, maybe especially our priests, that to understand that for some women, openness to seeking healing from abortion pain can also open up other issues that need healing. Often a priest can help with ongoing pastoral counseling and spiritual support, but sometimes therapeutic counseling is helpful. That is why the integrated diocesan approach to post-abortion healing is so essential, so that each woman receives what she needs and the talents of the priests and counselors involved can be appropriately directed. So who calls Project Rachel? Well, there is no single profile. It could be a woman in her teens or through the 90th generation. They may have had one abortion or several. Some are married, some are not. Some married women had their abortions before meeting their husbands and may or may not have told them. Often men who have lost children to abortion call. Increasingly, we encounter parents who chose abortion after receiving a poor prenatal diagnosis. Medical professionals and counselors who have participated in abortion also call. And in a broader sense, all those who grieve the loss of children from abortions call. Parents, grandparents, siblings, extended family members, some of whom may have played a direct role in the abortion, and others who were unaware or regret not getting involved. So what does a diocesan Project Rachel ministry offer? Well, of course, each diocese has its own particular ministry, but in every case, callers are referred through a confidential phone line. In some cases, neighboring dioceses can share resources and programming. The primary model is a specially trained network of priests and mental health professionals to whom the diocesan Project Rachel ministry staff can refer. In Boston, we also offer a one-day retreat format, a monthly support group, and a website with video explaining Project Rachel ministries, along with several dozen personal testimonies. These testimonies, like the ones in the brochure that you have at the back of the table, are particularly effective in helping women understand that they are not alone in their post-abortion grief and that there is hope and healing. I just want to say a word about these testimonies, particularly the ones in the book. Their authorships are deliberately kept anonymous, not out of shame or guilt, but to protect privacy. Whether or how a woman tells others about her abortion experience requires considerable discernment over time. She needs to consider not only the response that she will personally get, but also its impact on mothers. For example, 3 of the women who shared their testimonies in this booklet have young children. Were they to be publicly identified, their children could be seriously hurt. And these considerations, again, are another part of the integrated approach of Project Rachel. And while Project Rachel ministry is coordinated at the diocesan level, the active collaboration of parishes is essential to its success. I know I can say from Boston, referrals from parish bulletin notices are still the number one referral source. This tells us that there are many women in the pews on Sunday who still are in pain from their abortion experience. And sadly, we continue to encounter many women who have no idea that the Church offers a post-abortion ministry. I have personally seen and witnessed the power of forgiveness and resurrection through Project Rachel. It is awe-inspiring and humble. Faces that come in downcast and lowered truly do leave refreshed and smiling. One woman put it this way: I remember those dark years. I would wake up each morning, and for a few brief seconds, all was well. But then I would remember what I had done. The grief was all-consuming. But like so many other women, I kept it locked inside. I had accepted my fate. I was unforgivable. The enormity of what I had done actually made my steps heavier. Even my shoulders hung lower. I cried almost daily. For brief periods, I could take my mind off it, and sometimes I would even forget long enough to try to enjoy a comedy at the movies. But then, mid-laughter, I'd remember, and my laughing would stop because, well, I didn't deserve to laugh. And so she writes, though, thanks to Project Rachel, I am me again. Project Rachel allowed me the opportunity to experience God's love and forgiveness, something I had decided I was not worthy of. Now I actually feel lighter. The power of forgiveness is life-altering. I am happy again, and the people whom I love sense that. I will always regret my decision, and I will continue to carry my quiet secret with me. It has become a part of who I am, but it no longer defines who I am. There are many unique situations that you would deal with in the Project Rachel ministry. One seldom discussed issue is the pastoral need of working with elderly or dying women. Some women have pressured their daughters into having an abortion. One of our participants talked about her experience when she became pregnant as a high schooler, and she wanted to continue the pregnancy, but parents refused and said, "You will have an abortion." So she did what she was told, and she lived with pain and regret for 26 years. Finally, after her encounter with Project Rachel, she finally realized that even though God disapproved of her actions, God still loved her and she was forgivable. And that grace enabled her to speak to her mother. And this is what she wrote. "Special blessings came when I took the risk and shared all of what was happening with my mom. She cried and confessed that she too had been tormented by shame and guilt all those years." She goes on to say, "My mom got breast cancer and died within the next year. But Mom had the opportunity to reconcile with God and me before her death." There are many other women who had an abortion in the long-distant past and never talked about it. And I know one of the callers that continues to haunt me was an older woman who I believe was in a nursing home, and it sounds like that from the sounds in the background. And she had Catholic television on and heard a program about Project Rachel. So every once in a while she would call. She'd never give her name. She'd never say where exactly she was. She didn't want a priest to come. And then she stopped calling. So I have to assume that she passed away. And to me, she represents the millions of hurting souls that Project Rachel Ministries need to reach. And it's another reason why the outreach effort of the bishops on this effort is so vitally important. One final remark. The Church as a whole should need to understand that when post-abortive women experience the love and mercy of God through Project Rachel, not only are they individually transformed, their interpersonal relationships, marriages, and family life are also given new life. Another woman, and I'll end with her quote, put it this way. This woman had actually been raped at her high school prom and became pregnant. She was afraid to talk to her parents and schedule the abortion and just did it, in a very difficult situation in her life. And she lived with the trauma of the rape, the trauma of the abortion, the trauma of the loneliness for about 22 years. And finally, she went to a priest. And this is one of the great parts about the integrated approach to Project Rachel. Sometimes it is Project Rachel referring to priests, but oftentimes it's the other way around. And a priest referred her to Project Rachel. She came to a retreat and had a very life-changing experience, went on and worked in the support group and also received some spiritual direction. And in the course of all of this, other issues opened up, and she realized really for the first time that for almost 20 years, it was alcohol that was getting her through the day. And so as a result of her experience with Project Rachel, she went on to get incredible help from that addiction. And so this is how she described the end of her experience. "I know that my child is with God. I know that my living children and my husband and I are also with God. We are all together today in God's hands. I hold that child and my child in my heart every day, and I am grateful for Project Rachel for bringing me to this place of peace." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marianne. There are thousands upon thousands of stories just like that, and I do urge you to pick up the stories that are made available to you in that booklet. They're being published in the Boston Pilot, right? In the Pilot, the Archdiocesan paper. You stole a sheet of mine.
That's right. Looks like I stole more than one.
Thank you. In all other ways, you can trust Project Rachel people.
We're only human.
All right. Our next presenter is Father James Stack, who is ordained a priest in the Archdiocese of Washington and has been I don't have the number of years. We just celebrated your
25.
25th anniversary, that's right, and has been pastor at St. Jerome's Parish in Hyattsville for 13 of those years. Father Stack has a real heart for healing ministry in general and has served as a Project Rachel priest. Really offers of reconciliation for post-abortion healing and beyond are integrated into the life of the parish in a very beautiful way. They're mentioned regularly in the prayers of the faithful. There are signs in the ladies' room, etc. And he also celebrates a monthly Mass on Sunday afternoon for all who are in need of healing, including those suffering after involvement in abortion. So with no further explanation or ado, I'll introduce to you Father Stack.
The Lord's peace be with you. Thank you very much for coming and for inviting me to speak a little bit about Project Rachel. For me, Project Rachel is the back side of the equation. On the front side of the equation, we say don't have abortions. You know, abortions are not good. Yet when they have the abortion, then the church is there. The church is there as loving Father, as forgiveness, as, a way to bring the healing. In other words, we don't just say, oh, well, you had an abortion. You can't belong here anymore. And that to me, that to me is the other side of the equation. That you've had this, you've been lied to, and we're here to bring about the healing. And for me, that is probably the most beautiful thing that I see about Project Rachel. I'm just a normal parish priest. I'm just a normal guy. And I treat the healing just like anything else. We know that Jesus brought healing to the people of his day. And through the priest, Jesus continues that healing ministry. And out of my own inner healing that I went through, I found I went through a trauma back in the year 2000, and out of that, the Lord brought me healing. It took me 8 years to kind of sort of get to that point, and in about year 2006, I felt God calling me into a healing ministry, and so I've gone public with that. And it was back in 2006 and 2007, perhaps, Tom Grenchek asked me to, why don't you maybe bring some of that healing you got there, Father, to Project Rachel. And she put me in touch with Julia, and there began kind of my trip in the ministry of Project Rachel. I wrote down some words that I think fit to the people that we minister to. This is how they feel: forsaken, cursed, outcast, broken beyond repair, damaged goods. As priests, as all Christians, we're called to bring hope. To bring hope. Like Marianne did that Jeremiah 31 quote, I'm bringing you healing. And that's what I feel is so important, that they see me as priest, and they see me as someone that's not saying, oh, what did you do? Not being condemnatory, but being one of healing. Because a lot of times those words, they think that they are cursed. They think that God has abandoned them, that they have no more hope. And yet you have to try to convince them. I don't know if you've ever tried to convince somebody that they're not broken, they're not damaged, they're not broken beyond repair. But there is a lot of hope, because what happens is the enemy of our human nature, otherwise known as Satan, puts thoughts, ideas, and suggestions. Like, this is the battleground right here, right between your ideas, thoughts, and suggestions, that the evil one convinces these women and men that they are that way, and there is no hope. And as priests, you get a chance to turn that around, to bring that hope, That is what we're so much in need of. A lot of times it's been my ministry is that these women in particular have an awful time trying to forgive themselves. And a lot of times they just can't really establish healthy relationships anymore. So the first thing you have to do to bring them healing is to get them living the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because Jesus is two important things for them. First of all, the healer. When I meet with the women that come to me, not only in the sessions that we have, the support groups, but also in they'll come contact me afterwards and come to my parish and begin a whole battery of spiritual direction. And one of the things I find them trying to deal with is they keep on jumping from one bad relationship into the next. And that you got to give them the healing in there. And the other thing that Jesus does is Jesus Christ is the only person who has the ability to connect that aborted child back with their mother, because we believe in everlasting life. Jesus Christ is the essential link between that woman ever seeing her child again. And we encourage them to name the child. We encourage them to know their child. And we encourage them that relationship is not over. We believe in eternal life, and eternal life brings us back into relationship with our daughter, our son, whatever the sex of the child might be. One of the things I do is inner healing. Okay, there's all different types of healing. There's healing of the emotions. There's healing of the body. There's healing of the spirit. There's healing of relationships and so on. And there's psychological healing. But the inner healing that we describe, I try, just to give an example, we try to go back in time. Jesus, because he's risen Lord, transcends time and space. And it's the power of Jesus' Spirit that can kind of walk those women back through their experience. And in walking them back through that experience, we're able to take the pain out of the memory. See, that's what hurts. That memory they're always going to have of aborting their child. They're always going to have that memory that is never, never, ever going to go away, because that's the way we're made. But what inner healing does is it goes back, and through the power of the Spirit of Jesus, we go back and take that pain out of the memory. And then we give them the hope that look to the future, look forward, because you will see that child again because of eternal life. So those are just a few things that I can speak about. The forgiveness is huge. There are nights that I come out of those support groups 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and I'm just exhausted. Because when you're trying to convince people that they're not broken beyond repair, that's hard work. Because it's a spiritual battle is what it is. It's spiritual warfare, because the enemy, thoughts, ideas, and suggestions, has convinced these ladies, these men, that that's true. That everybody else can be healed, but no, not me. It's not going to happen to me. And that's a lie. These people have been lied to. And so what we try to do is bring in the truth of Jesus, the truth of the healing, so that they might get themselves into healthy relationships. And then begin to use the gifts that God has given them. Because they've been through an experience. I haven't been through that experience, but they've been through an experience. They know what that feels. So what I try to do is I say, you can use your experience to do good instead of allowing the experience to continue to pull you down and make you feel like trash. It's very much the same thing that St. Damien de Boyster did on the island of Malachi when he was dealing with the lepers. They had become morally depraved because life was over for them. And look what he did. Look what he did in his priesthood for those outcasts. Turned the whole ideas around. Praise be Jesus Christ, both now and forever. Amen.
Thank you so much, Father Stack. Next up is Dr. Vince Rue, who is the director for the Institute for Pregnancy Loss in Jacksonville, Florida. So I believe he Well, I don't know. Jacksonville's further than Boston, so you traveled the furthest for this event. Dr. Rue received his PhD, the Institute for Pregnancy Loss is an independent, nonprofit research and treatment center. He received his PhD in Human Development and Family Studies from the University of North Carolina in 1975, and for 30 years, Dr. Rue has been a practicing psychotherapist and has served on the faculty of California State University at Los Angeles and the United States International University in San Diego. It's particularly of note here today that in 1981, 30 years ago, Dr. Rue provided the first clinical evidence of post-abortion trauma, identifying this psychological condition as post-abortion syndrome in testimony before the U.S. Congress. In 1984, he published one of the first articles on abortion's impact on men and relationships, and over the years has treated numerous women and men who have been traumatized by their abortion experience. Also, during the Reagan administration, Dr. Rue was a special consultant to the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. C. Everett Koop, on abortion morbidity. He has a very impressive CV. Several of his articles are available for your study and research in the back of the room. Today, he will all too briefly, summarize the large body of that literature on mental health problems after abortion. Dr. Rue.
Thank you very much, Deidre, and thank you to the Secretariat and the Committee for Pro-Life Activities to allow me to be here today. It's my privilege and honor. I have been in this field for a good many years, and sometimes it feels like I'm saying the same thing over and over and over. What's interesting to me is here we're talking about Project Rachel. And yet, indeed, what is the need for Project Rachel? Because if we listen to the national professional mental health organizations, abortion carries no psychological health risks, certainly none greater than childbirth. And, that flies in the face of the stories that you will read about, the thousands of stories that I have heard, and the stories that you hear from women and men impacted from abortion, both in this country and abroad. Indeed, post-abortion trauma is not a Catholic issue. It is not a U.S. issue. It is a human issue. Why? Because abortion represents, to those who are negatively impacted by it, it represents an intentional death experience, and as such is capable of causing traumatic re-experiencing, avoidance, and hyperarousal. Now, I'm going to go into that in a minute, but we only have a few minutes because today I have about 10 minutes to cover 40 years of research. 30 years are covered in this 2-page handout, and so I'll give that to you. It's right in the back. There are other studies back there that I would recommend that you picking up. These studies are a little bit difficult to get through, so my job is to try and just synthesize them if I can today. I will say this about post-abortion trauma. It has generally been greeted with more openness outside of the United States than within the United States, which is curious to me. For example, just recently, the British Journal of Psychiatry published a very important piece by Priscilla Coleman it's a meta-analysis, and the American Journal of Psychiatry would never have done so. So we've seen this repeatedly, and many authors have to publish internationally. I speak to you both as a clinician and a researcher and as someone that does consulting with attorney generals throughout the United States on abortion-related litigation. I take it as a truism that the patient's perception of the abortion event is determinative. That means I, as a therapist, cannot impose, well, I read that abortion doesn't cause any mental health problems, and therefore what you are telling me you're experiencing isn't real. You really Believe it or not, that does happen, and it happens all too frequently. And sadly, the American Psychological Association in 2008 provided a report to the American people that basically says abortion, when compared to childbirth, carries no increased relative risk. I would submit to you that that is incorrect. And it is incorrect scientifically, and there is abundant research, some 385 studies that would argue in opposition to what the APA said. If we look at mental health issues following abortion, and usually I use this in a PowerPoint, so forgive me, I'm just going to use my hands. On this side is post-abortion distress. This is the same thing as overdrawing your checkbook or finding out your children failed their grade or what have you. This is distress. It's upsetting, it's problematic, but no one dies of this, okay? That's on this side of the continuum. Right next to it is stress, which is a precursor for trauma. And trauma is part of an anxiety disorder and mood disorder. And that's an area that we are very concerned about and treat actively as psychotherapists. And next to that is a worsened condition called a psychotic dimension, where people actually lose touch with reality. And schizophrenia and some major depressive syndromes are in this category. And then finally, over here, we have suicide and death, which is obviously the most serious of all. So if you look at post-abortion reactions across this continuum, you see on the left a very minor reaction all the way to the potential for death. And you should know that when compared to delivery, the best studies identify abortion carrying a 6 times greater risk of suicide. Now, I don't know where the APA got their information, but I tell you that it's really wrong. And it's interesting to me that pro-choice clinicians have identified a range of psychological problems of 10 to 30%. And existing quantitative research, and that, I mean, is different than qualitative, where we're looking at a smaller sample size and less empirical indices. When we look at quantitative research, we see a range of 10 to 60% of individuals impacted by abortion across that continuum. In terms of traumatic stress, let me just say this, that the American Psychiatric Association in 1987 included abortion as a type of psychosocial stressor that is capable of causing anxiety disorders and mood disorders. Abortion was a type of psychosocial stressor capable of causing this. Well, in 1994, they took that out. In 1992, we published the first study identifying abortion as traumatic. And I think that the political incorrectness of this is overwhelming. If we look at the major world literature on abortion, we find 4 types of mental illness that have been consistently identified, and they are as follows, in this order. Substance abuse. Substance abuse is chronically linked to abortion. Why? Because people are self-medicating. They're dealing with trauma, they're dealing with grief, they're dealing with unresolved issues surrounding this intentionally caused human death experience. That is followed by suicidal ideation. If abortion were the removal of tissue, if it were the same as going to the dentist's office and getting a cavity repaired, it would be illogical to have this kind of major psychiatric response. We would question that. But because we listen to what patients say, and they're the ones that have taught me, and it is they who are the ones that inform research, that suicidal thinking is serious. I see no other way out except to end my life. Indeed, one woman did so in New Jersey, and this case just went to trial this year. She hung herself and left a note saying, "And now I can be with my unborn child in heaven." The next most frequent is anxiety disorders. And they range from generalized anxiety to obsessive compulsive disorders to PTSD, to phobic responses. These are serious, and these require professional attention. And then lastly, depression, mood disorders. And when you look at these, the common symptoms are people disconnecting from life. And they're disconnecting because they're carrying a burden, a secret shame, an unacknowledged grief and loss that they are increasingly finding too heavy to lift. Abortion is associated with a higher risk for negative psychological outcomes when compared to other forms of perinatal loss and with unintended pregnancy carried to term. There's a question about, well, how do you compare abortion if you're going to do a study? Do you take abortion and compare it to women with no abortion? Do you take an abortion and compare it to women who deliver? Or do you take an abortion and compare it with women who have an unintended pregnancy and deliver? Well, the problem is pregnancy intendedness and wantedness varies considerably across a continuum. And so some people argue, well, you have to have this and you have to have that. The research is clear. Both the early research, and by early I mean 1973 on up to 1985, that early research was formative. In all psychological sciences, we rely upon early clinical reports, anecdotal information, small sample size, to establish the reality of a syndrome. Epidemiologically, then we start looking at with larger studies, and that is exactly what we have found. In larger studies, Coleman found, for example, an increased risk of 81% for mental health problems when she examined over 800,000 women in her meta-analysis. She found 10% of all mental health problems can be linked directly to abortion. She found the increased risk for anxiety disorders was 34%. For depression, it was 37%. For alcohol abuse, it was 110%. And for marijuana use, it was 220%. And suicide, increased risk for suicide, 155%. Now, I want to say this, that there have been 4 meta-analyses which are the most rigorous quantitative studies available in science. There have been 4 of these across 50 million abortions. Now that's pathetic, but at least it's something. 2 of which have just been published, Coleman and Ferguson. Ferguson's is also under review right now with the British Journal of Psychiatry. But Ferguson basically corroborated the same thing Coleman found. I was part of the team that did the first meta-analysis, and we did this in 1987, along with Jim Rogers and Ann Speckert and Wanda Franz. And we found then there was an increased risk for 55,000 women were predicted to experience negative psychosocial outcomes from abortion in a 1-year period. And there was the likelihood of 10,000 women who would be hospitalized in a psychiatric facility as a result of their abortion. We also found in this meta-analysis that compared to any control group, women who had an abortion had increased risk for mental health problems. A 1990 study basically confirmed our earlier study, and now larger studies, Coleman and Ferguson, have supported the prior two meta-analyses. So what we have come to in this country is a rather conclusive situation in science where the known risks are available, but the political realities are preventing that from being identified. What is wonderful about Project Rachel is that you can debate the percents until the cows come home. But make no mistake, there are some women and men who are grievously psychologically injured by their abortion. If that is 1%, as Brenda Major says, or if it is 60%, the point is, who is there to help them? And in the mental health community, there's been too much denial of this. And in the Catholic Church, there has consistently been an openness to reconciliation and to providing hope where there is no hope. And so this research informs Project Rachel and other ministries. It informs them of the need, and it encourages them to continue this work so that those who are in harm's way can find healing and help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rue. Our last presenter is here to provide you with some practical resources. Susan Wills, my colleague in the Pro-Life Secretariat, really trained as an attorney. Susan has encyclopedic knowledge of so many things, and post-abortion healing is absolutely no exception. I'll just briefly say, since we're running low on time, that Susan's commitment to God's oceans of mercy that are available to all who have been involved in abortion, it's procuring abortion, performing them, promoting them, as well as those who are harmed indirectly by that violence of abortion. She's just a tremendous asset to the Secretariat and now more broadly, of course, to the broader ministry of Project Rachel. I give you Susan Wills.
Thank you, Deirdre, for that overly generous introduction. My task today is to discuss resources that have newly been developed by the Bishops' Conference to help strengthen and promote the Project Rachel ministry. You may ask yourselves, why now, after 27 years of serving post-abortive men and women, are we coming out with a new manual and other resources? Well, the truth is there are, of course, many priests who are newly ordained, new staff coming on board all the time, and happily many lay counselors who are very much interested in becoming part of the ministry. But in addition, over the past decades, Project Rachel Ministry priests and counselors have been able to gain a far deeper understanding of the needs of certain people who have been coming forward more and more frequently for help. For example, the fathers of aborted children, and now often the grandmothers of aborted children. In addition, priests and counselors have learned much more about addressing the needs of specific groups of people, such as teens, young women who are very recently aborted and who are quickly facing crises after their abortions, as well as parents whose obstetricians convinced them that they needed to abort a child due to a poor prenatal diagnosis, and even parents who come to realize that their fertility treatments resulted in the deaths of several or more of their children. In each of these cases, it is important that care be individualized, and we felt it important to share best practices at this time with all the priests and Project Rachel leaders. The manual, here it is. I'll leave a copy for you to go through later. The manual, it's also downloadable on the website, which I'll show you in a moment. Shows that this ministry is not a one-size-fits-all ministry. It really needs to be designed to help the individual needs of those who are suffering. As I said, this can be downloaded at hopeafterabortion.org. The contents are very simple. We address the aftermath, for the range of aftermath for women, and the steps for healing. There's a new section on fathers and how their specific needs and specific reactions depending on their relationship with the mother of the child and their religious beliefs and whatnot. Others hurt by abortion, the grandparents and friends and so forth. A fourth section deals with the parish and how all priests can make their parish a place that is very welcoming to those who've had abortion and, in fact, to all sinners. And then the diocese with tips on how to build and strengthen a solid ministry in each diocese, as well as a discussion of the canonical perspective on abortion and then a number of resources. I mentioned our website, which we'll get to in just a moment, but another tool which we developed, did you put it down here? Yes. The pamphlet which we provided for you in the back. This obviously is intended for the outreach. The manual primarily focuses on building and strengthening ministry, and then the flip side of that coin is to promote it so that all women and men who need help will know where to come. The pamphlet was designed essentially for parish pamphlet racks and any other venue where those who've been involved in abortion, and particularly Catholics, might be able to find it. We produced over 250,000 of these pamphlets a year ago, and most of them were customized with specific local contact information for each diocese. And now we're close to being sold out, so a new reprint is in the offing. The main purpose of the pamphlet is, of course, to assure women and men who've been involved in abortion that God loves them tenderly and desires nothing more than to draw them close to his heart and heal their wounds and restore them to a life of grace. And it provides contact information so readers can locate the Project Rachel ministry closest to where they live. But it also has a second purpose, and that is to acquaint the general public with the aftermath of abortion as experienced by so many people, so that they may be a little bit more sensitive sometimes in approaching such people and discussing abortion. Many of the photos that you see in the pamphlet were chosen initially for the outreach campaign, which we refer to by the shorthand Love and Mercy campaign. Several transit ads are posted around the room, and the transit ads can easily be reformatted as bulletin posters, billboards, postcard size, mini ads for parish bulletins, and newspapers and other purposes. The very talented designer, Lisa Toscani, helped us to develop the concept for these ads and even the text, as well as the images. Each ad presents a close-up image of a thoughtful woman or man. The text at the top represents the person's inner voice, revealing their worst fears and feelings about themselves, which we all took from actual testimonies of women and men. For example, God will never forgive me for this. I don't deserve to be happy. I feel so worthless. And the text that follows in each ad represents the voice of God responding to their pain. In most cases, we had to put it in the third person so that it would be readily understandable that it's God speaking. For example, God's greatest desire is to forgive. God wants to restore your happiness. You are precious to me, capitalized. And the lower section invites the viewer to come back to God, who is love and mercy. And only then, at the bottom, can one see the logo for Project Rachel, the name Project Rachel, along with the website address, Hope After Abortion. And it's the only mention of abortion in the ad. So we hope to draw in viewers before they see what it's all about. And then, of course, most of the ads have either the local contact information or the nationwide toll-free number. As Cardinal DiNardo announced yesterday to the Bishops' Conference, we are very pleased to officially launch a beautifully updated version of hopeafterabortion.org. If the gremlins lurking in cyberspace will cooperate, I will walk you through just a few pages of that. Oh, yay, there it is. So we start out with these 3 screenshots, which you saw in the earlier stationary PowerPoint slide, which describe what the site is all about. Thereafter, where's my cursor? The main page also has images of 4 women, and the first one after the abortion, the link takes you to a popular pamphlet describing the abortion experience that's ideal for parish use. The Many Faces of Post-Abortion Grief links to an article by Dr. Joanne Angelo, a Catholic psychiatrist of Boston. It's a scholarly article, but it's very accessible. How to Talk to a Friend, the third one, is a pamphlet we also produced and made available to you on the back table. And finally, Expressions of Healing and Thanks are simply snippets that we took from some of the emails sent to our website, thanking discussing their healing or their progress in healing. Let me see if I can get there. There we go. Expressions of thanks, often just for the presence of the website. In one particular case, the first one we have there is from a woman who contacted us, the Rachel director who responds to these messages when women ask for a response, encouraged this lady to go to confession and not be afraid of doing so. And she wrote us back, "I want you to know I went to confession tonight," as was suggested in answering the letter. "I was terrified, needlessly. The priest who heard my confession was not disgusted by me or angry with me. He never stopped smiling at me, even as I revealed my ugliest sins. He was gentle, kind, and loving. Of course, this made me cry hard. He was patient. He absolved me of my sins, told me I was worthy of all God's kingdom." So, not what I expected. This website planted a seed of hope in my heart that I could really be forgiven. God took it from there. Thank you so much for being there in a way that didn't make me feel dirty or contemptible, for making me feel human again. I think that really captures so much of what the church is able to do. There are buttons at the top, which I'll go through very briefly. The Find Help button, the Find Help button takes you to a brief description of Project Rachel and a map of the United States here. I'll just click on the South Midwest, and you'll see that every office of Project Rachel Ministry is listed in that geographic area. In all, there are approximately 155 dioceses which have Project Rachel offices, some of them multiple offices, and those are 178 Latin dioceses, of course. Abortion's Aftermath page offers a number of popular and academic resources on abortion aftermath. Your Own Words has some stories written to our website, as well as this is the location of their letters to us. I've posted approximately 100 pages or so of letters written to us with responses, and I have another 100 or so pages, single-spaced, small font, to sift through and choose. Under resources, we have resources designed for the directors of ministry. Our radio ads. This is where you can download the manual, the pamphlet, and then all of the Love and Mercy campaign materials. Just one second. Prayers, very briefly. We included a prayer section. This image is from another one of the ads in our Love and Mercy campaign. And I'll just click on one prayer. These are all designed because they're particularly consoling to those who are in need of God's mercy. That image in particular was used in our 1999 outreach campaign. Finally, Contact Us is the place where women and men can go to send us their own personal stories or to request help. So it's still a work in progress. There's still much to add to the website, but all in all, we're quite pleased with its new and inviting look. And now I will turn it back over to Deirdre one last item, which was also announced yesterday by the Cardinals, is that we will be offering a 2-day training to dioceses where the bishop has asked for our assistance to train priests and staff and lay counselors in Project Rachel Ministry. Many of them currently have a program, but it's not full service, doesn't have an integrated approach. They may offer only 1 or 2 modalities of healing. So beginning early next year, we'll be going out as a team to help dioceses who request help from us. Let me just turn this off so I won't distract us with the squirrel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. Sorry to rush you there at the end, but I do want to allow time. This is a press briefing, and we have reporters here who may be very interested in asking questions. I'll set the same basic ground rules if you'd like to please come to the microphone so we can all benefit from hearing your question. Identify who you are, even though we may already be familiar with you, and address your question to a particular panelist or two. Please.
Ann Rogers at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I guess my question would be for Marianne Luthin and Father Stack, because you're involved on a diocesan level. What's your experience of, how much response you're getting to this? I mean, are the phones for your diocesan office, ringing constantly? I mean, do you have a sense that you have more resources to offer than people who are interested, or a sense that you're being overwhelmed by calls? How would you characterize the response?
I can speak from the diocesan, and then Father Stack can speak from his personal priestly experience. As I mentioned in my remarks, we still rely primarily on parish bulletins as the number one source of referrals for Project Rachel. In a sense, it's almost too simple, because you would think, how could an anonymous bulletin notice affect people? But over and over and over again, that is the means by which people feel safe coming. There are beautiful ads and brochures, but some women have told us they're afraid to pick them up because they think somebody's going to see them do it and ask, why is she doing that? So the anonymous bulletin notices are a phenomenal resource, and as we, for example, use them to publicize retreats. I mean, you can tell how the call volume goes, that once they go out, the calls go up. If they're not out there, they go down. The website has also been a tremendous resource. It's probably now about our second top referral source, and particularly younger women feel more comfortable making that connection. But we know the hundreds of people who call with very little advertising, it just gives you some sense of the pain that is out there.
I'll just speak briefly because I need to catch a flight. It keeps me pretty busy, I got to say, because once they find someone who will listen and someone who will be compassionate and someone who can spend the time, then they come back. And, consequently, my parish office is like a dentist office. People just lined up one after the other. So it has the potential to keep you pretty busy. And it's just because you're open to it.
If I may, just very briefly, Deirdre, in 1999 and 2000, we sponsored an ad campaign in the Washington metropolitan area. It included the Baltimore Archdiocese and the Diocese of Arlington. Radio ads were broadcast on many of the stations at that time. They can also be heard on the website. There were billboards and other modes of advertising as well. The calls in Washington, D.C. and in Baltimore and Arlington increased between 800 and 1,000% while these radio ads and the campaign was ongoing. Every diocese that uses the radio ads, often on Catholic radio stations or Christian radio stations, sees a huge uptick in the number, and they can be offered as PSAs, often during the night when women are still lying awake. So that's another very successful way to draw people to the ministry.
I'd like to note that I saw somebody was trying to follow Father Stack. We do have a list of the contact information for all our panelists, plus Dr. Coleman and also Julia Shalava, who are making themselves available to you for further comment after today's gathering. If I may ask, maybe we could continue another 5 minutes. Is that possible? We certainly can in-house. Whether or not they can keep videotaping us is another question. Please.
Great. I'd like to. I'm Mark Zimmerman, the editor of the Catholic Standard newspaper in Washington, and I'd like to pose this question to Dr. Rue. About a year ago, Dr. Leroy Carhart opened up a late-term abortion clinic in Germantown, Maryland, and I was wondering if there's been research that quantifies the impact of late-term abortions on women and men who are affected by it.
Yes, as a matter of fact, there's not a lot of research, but we just published an article, I'm not sure if it's back there, comparing first trimester abortions to second trimester abortions and later. Second trimester abortions are about 12% of the annual incidence of abortions in this country. My clinical experience and from our research experience suggests that as gestation increases, there is correspondingly considerable ambivalence. Ambivalence is a known predictor for post-abortion trauma. Another predictor of post-abortion trauma is attachment to the fetus. And as the fetus grows and there is movement and there is a relationship, it stands to reason that that attachment becomes more complicated. You know, I want you, but I don't want you. And the mother and the child have a relationship. It is an existing relationship. So the complications of second trimester abortion, the physical complications, equal and or exceed the physical complications of childbirth, which is interesting because oftentimes most abortions are first trimesters, and people are left with the impression abortion is physically safer than childbirth. It is certainly not in the second trimester. However, probably the highest risks are the psychological risks, in my opinion. We found this when Dr. Koop and Dr. Henry David and I were working on the abortion morbidity report for the president, is that the mental health complications generally are higher than the physical complications in abortion.
Please.
Jason Tomasini with Reuters. There's been a kind of a theme at this conference of the issue of religious liberty, and I'm wondering whether any of these pro-life efforts have been hindered either on a national level, maybe through healthcare reform laws, or different decisions at the state level, or even just at a local parish level, with how some of these efforts are potentially hindered by local governments and local political movements.
Are you addressing your question to any particular panelist?
Yeah, Ms. Luthin and Mr. Rue, I guess.
Do you want to take that one?
I'm not sure what you're asking. Are you asking about, in the context of religious liberty, is there an infringement on the ability and capabilities on the local level based upon certain political persuasions about abortion? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, kind of going in theme with some of the things talked about yesterday by Bishop Laurie, some of the efforts from the Catholic Church to kind of regain some of the religious liberty of their constituents in the face of some of the political movements that have come against it.
Well, I can, I think, address a little bit of that. Maybe Susan would want to address some more. Certainly with respect to physicians and health care, those Catholic physicians and Catholic psychotherapists are in a bit of a bind because, first of all, Catholic professionals don't refer for abortion out of conscience. And consequently, there is political pressure and now legal pressure to refer. It is unethical, in my opinion, to refer for an intervention, for treatment, that has known psychological health risks that are not explored and are not identified for a patient prior to that procedure. And I have worked in numerous states in terms of state legislation, and I have been involved in numerous medical malpractice actions, both as a testifying expert and as a consulting expert. And in my opinion, the kinds of counseling that women are provided in pre-abortion is substantially and significantly inadequate. Thus, for the practitioner in the field, be they Catholic or not, there is, I believe, a duty to communicate what these risks are and to describe in detail fetal development, alternatives to abortion, etc., so that a woman has true informed consent as opposed to making a misinformed consent decision. Susan, would you want to?
I would like to add, to my knowledge, there's been no infringement on the Church's post-abortion ministry due to efforts to restrict the religious liberty of the Catholic Church. There is one factor that probably works against the success of the ministry, and that is when the media in general, not the people in this room, of course, but speak of the Church as being judgmental about abortion, highlight excommunication when it's completely inappropriate to do so, portray the Church as being very harsh to women and dismissing them and excommunicating them. So, and also there are very good pro-lifers out there, well-meaning, who, may show posters that, frankly, very much hurt a woman who suffered an abortion. To see a bloody fetus picture shoved in her face can be very harmful to them and drive them to feel that the Church simply, and pro-lifers simply, are opposed to them and cannot possibly offer them healing and hope. So we always present at the Bishops' Conference the dual message. Yes, abortion is a wrong, but we're all sinners in the Church, and the Church is here to help heal those who have failed to do the right choice.
May I also add, Project Rachel ministry is offered to all regardless of their own creedal identification or none at all. Anyone who is hurting and in need of healing and this kind of confidential care may approach freely. Priests, counselors will not turn anybody away. Please. This will be our last question.
Joan Desmond, the National Catholic Register. I had a question getting back to that point, Deirdre, about non-Catholics approaching Project Rachel. And I'm wondering if people have been given a lot of different information about the impact of abortion, and yet they're experiencing this traumatic reaction. How do they make sense of that? How do they end up going to Project Rachel if they do? Do you have some kind of larger network of referrals? And then related to that, because I know there's a high percentage of African American women having abortions, I'm almost wondering, listening to this information, whether there's a systemic problem, that is reinforced by misinformation, bad counseling, and economic pressures and otherwise to go ahead and have abortions.
To address the campaign?
Sure, and also Marianne.
I'd just point out, Joan, I find it fascinating because I'm the one who picks up the phone, and often you will get a call from a therapist who will begin the conversation by saying, look, I'm not Catholic, but I am working with a woman who's feeling tremendous pain and grief and loss over abortion, particularly if it was a Catholic client, and she'll say, can you tell me what your church teaches, because I don't understand. And they're trying to find the help. The experiential, as Dr. Rue points out, is so important that time after time after time, therapists are hearing about the impact of abortion, particularly those in the substance abuse area. Over and over again, they hear the connection of abortion, and they independently are reaching out for help. And if you go on the internet, there aren't a whole lot of places to go for post-abortion healing other than the work of Project Rachel and a few other distinctively Christian or ecumenical groups. So if you can't find it in the professions, you have to seek it where it can be found.
I alluded earlier to the 2000 Jubilee campaign on post-abortion that was conducted in a number of dioceses, but we kept track of what was occurring here in town. Clearly, the radio ads were reaching a much broader community than the Catholic community, given the demographics of this area. Probably half of the people who called the Project Rachel offices were African American, and I think about virtually all of them were not Catholic. They were sent material to give them more information about the ministry. When it was offered to them to speak to a trained counselor, and there were various ministers of other denominations who were available and trained in Project Rachel ministry to handle their counseling if they desired it. But it was explained to them that the priests involved in Project Rachel in Washington are not out to proselytize them in any way. They're simply trained in this ministry. They know how to help them out through their abortion experience. And they were very happy to see Catholic priests in that case. We had a number of priests, I can't recall the exact figure, but many, many trained priests ready and willing to take part in the counseling. As a result of the campaign, they reached capacity very quickly. I mean, they contacted us and said, please don't send me any more women right now because you just have to route them elsewhere. I already have a very full plate. So there was just a huge response. And it really, I think, had a wonderful ecumenical flavor because they were, number one, incredibly surprised that the Catholic Church cared about women and their pain after abortion. And number two, they were very happy that we made the services available to them as well.
I want to thank everybody for coming, for your thoughtful questions, and I encourage you to take all the pamphlets and studies if you weren't able to do so on your way in. And again, our website where all these resources and more can be found is www.hopeafterabortion.org. Thank you for your time.